Let's have a listen to what Mr Starmer said on reforms plans.
We are a proud, tolerant country, reasonable-minded, live and let live, and we are a diverse country where people have come here for centuries to this country to make up who we are. It is one thing to say we're going to remove illegal migrants, people who have no right to be here. I'm up for that. It is a completely different thing to say we are going to reach in to people who are lawfully here and start removing them. They are our neighbours. I do think it is a racist policy. I do think it's immoral. It needs to be called out for what it is.
Yeah, I mean, it depends, I guess, Callum, where you set the kind of line on what is racist and what is immoral.
It does, to an extent, but I think the sort of bigger question mark here is exactly what has led him to say that at all.
Yeah.
I think it's clearly a gaffe. It doesn't sound like he meant or planned to say it, not least because Shabana Mahmood's going to go and do something pretty robust herself this afternoon that would have been sanctioned, of course, by the Prime Minister in Number 10. And what it does is it completely alienates all of the people who have legitimate and serious concerns about immigration, much of which is illustrated by Reform's poll lead. So saying that policy is racist or that those things are racist completely alienates an entire almost half the population, arguably, and puts them off you, and completely undermines your own tone about being tough on immigration, about being the ones to have the plan to control it, because people just think, well, clearly they just think I'm a racist. Now, to give Starmer credit, well, I'm not sure who deserves it, but if you're playing it, giving him the really charitable case, there's maybe some nuance in it, in that maybe he's attacking the fact that Reform's policy, I think, is retrospective and would go to apply to people who've already got that indefinitely to remain, whereas Shabana Mahmood's policy might not. But that's a very, very nuanced perspective, and in the world of sort of political comms today, I don't think that nuance is necessarily going to be borne out. Reform quite rightly jumped on it immediately and caused this stink. So yes, I mean, but it is also about, where do you draw the line between racist and immoral? Clearly, it's not racist. I don't think it's immoral either. It is punchy. I'm not sure I necessarily am a fan of it myself, but you should be dealing with the policy with what it says rather than sort of emotive, broad strokes words like that, I think.
Indeed, and if Reform had not mentioned the retrospective thing and they just announced essentially what Labour have now announced, then they would still be called immoral by their left-wing detractors. They'd still be called racist by their left-wing detractors. It wouldn't change.
I think you're right, and I think that speaks to this sort of the way that the climate of opinion, or the Overton window, or whatever you like to call it, has shifted so far in this sort of anti-immigration direction. And I think that's because of a result of the sheer amount of numbers of people that we've had coming over legally, as well as the small boats crisis and all of the broken promises of previous governments of all stripes about controlling it. And now we're really in a world in which a Labour Home Secretary is going to get up and say some pretty punchy things that not that long ago would have been deemed by their side certainly as racist. And I expect that, let's not ignore the context here, Keir Starmer's doing his big Sunday morning interviews on the weekend of Labour conference. That's the audience he's got in mind. All of his Labour Party activists, the sort of left of his party, Andy Burnham, who's piping up quite a lot to be a potential challenger. Yeah. That's the audience he's speaking to, but he forgot maybe he's on the BBC and speaking to the whole country.
Yes, I think you're right. We will we'll obviously keep our eye on this, and we'll hear what the Home Secretary specifically announces at around about 3:30 this afternoon. Let's move to this story. Once again, our embattled, unpopular Chancellor Rachel Reeves can't even give a simple guarantee that she'll stick to her own pledges. This time she's refused to rule out a rise in VAT. Let's have a listen to what she said.
Are you going to... Can you rule out increasing VAT? It's a yes or no?
What I'm saying to you
no,
is
I've
that
asked the question,
can
you rule out increasing VAT?
A reason.
I know, but can you rule it out?
The manifesto stands, and it stands for a reason. Look, I'm not going to, on this programme, 2 months ahead of the budget, to go through it line by line.
No, I've only asked you about one thing and one line.
Yes, but we made that commitment in the manifesto. We made it for a reason, and those commitments stand. Those commitments remain our commitments for this budget and for this Parliament. The manifesto stands, Susanna.
Okay.
Well, that was her speaking on breakfast telly this morning, Callum. And then, of course, she hits the conference stage, and she's now transformed into some kind of Labour powerhouse, spouting all of her achievements. There was no stopping her. Have a listen to Rachel Reeves.
Now a party in government, not a party of protest. And I'm proud to stand here as your Chancellor. The Chancellor that's increased the minimum wage, a Chancellor that is introducing free breakfast clubs and free school meals, a Chancellor that's overseen 5 cuts to interest rates. That's the difference we make, and that is the difference we make in power, not through protest. Our party has changed, and that is why I am standing here, proud to be your Chancellor of the Exchequer.
Wow, there you go, Callum. Anything you thought about Rachel Reeves? Rethink, because she's brilliant. How do we know? She just told us.
You heard it from the horse's mouth first.
Yeah.
I thought the speech was quite interesting. She mentioned breakfast clubs more than she mentioned taxes. And the one big takeaway we can take, which we knew already, but just to confirm, we are definitely having a big tax hike come the budget in autumn. And there was one reason for that. It's because the Labour government so far has been completely incapable of cutting expenditure in any way. It's tried a few times, it's U-turned every single time. Now, the public finances are already a nightmare. The ballooning welfare bill, the pensions liabilities that we have, the amount of state expenditure is going up and up and up and up and up and keeps going. To fund that requires either stripping back that rise by cutting elsewhere, or even just by saying, actually, for the next few years, we're not going to increase public expenditure anymore. We're just going to hold it at that. But no, they're clearly not doing that, and they are, to their credit, to an extent, sticking to their fiscal rules. That means that tax rises are coming. We can talk until the cows come home about which those taxes will be, but they're definitely coming.
It's also been announced as well that young people refusing job offers after 18 months may face sanctions. Trying to get kids or youngsters between 18 and 24 back into work. She's talking about apprenticeships and all manner of other things that you will be essentially compelled to do if you can't get a job in 18 months.
Yeah, it's quite interesting that it is another example of where different actions from this government are working against each other, because at the same time it's saying it's going to get lots of young people back into work and is even going to impose sanctions if they don't, or into training or education. They're making it extra expensive to hire young people. They're hiking taxes on employment through the national insurance hike, which raises the cost of employing anybody, but then they're also raising the minimum wage, not just across the board, but they're equalising the minimum wage for young people. So they're going to make it more expensive to hire a young person. If I'm a business and I'm looking at who I'm going to hire, am I going to hire the 23-year-old who's done some time at uni and has had some part-time jobs, or am I going to hire the 18-year-old? Well, if they're going to cost me the same, I'm going to hire the 23-year-old. But if I can hire the 18-year-old for a little bit less, then I might look at the 18-year-old. But now the government is suggesting, actually, we're going to somehow guarantee these jobs. So what? Is the government going to, out of taxpayers' pockets, pay for the imposed costs that the government has imposed themselves? It doesn't make a lot of sense to me.
Yeah, and I just sense it sounded like, when she was talking about this, one of those things we never, ever hear about again. Is that too cynical, Callum? Come X amount of months or years down the line, I think this will just be kicked into the long grass.
It wouldn't surprise me at all. This isn't the first of these sorts of schemes that we've heard about.
Nope.
It definitely won't be the last. If it actually appears, we'll wait and see.
Yeah, we will wait and see. And the other one that's not going to go away at the moment, and that is digital ID. We know that we've got, what's the number now? I think it's nearly 3 million, isn't it, that signed this petition to block the introduction of compulsory digital ID. So, I mean, governments tend not to listen very much, do they, to petitions, whether they're physical and in person, and certainly when they're online. But nonetheless, I mean, the government can't not be aware of the amount of disquiet around this policy.
Yeah, the government might not listen to the overall ask, which I think is to basically drop the digital ID. But what it might do, especially at this scale of signatures, is think about how it's going to frame it and what it's going to do around the edges to improve it and allay people's concerns. And about on the privacy front, what they need to do is take a look at what it exactly is going to be used for, and what the slippery slope looks like. That is the biggest fear for me, is that this becomes not just an ID to prove your right to work, when you already have to do that with ID you have anyway, but that actually once we have a digital ID, it's going to suddenly be used to do all sorts of things. Actually, yeah, we'll use it for the NHS and for welfare benefits as well, and then actually we might say, companies need to use it to check ID at shops, then suddenly you are having a national database get pinged every time you want to buy a can of Red Bull in Tesco. So the government needs to. They may not listen to the. They may not completely drop the idea because a few people have signed a petition, although there was a lot of people that have signed that petition. But they may think actually there is a bigger concern than we thought here in terms of people's worries about privacy. So we will put in some strict parameters. We will communicate them clearly, and we'll make sure this goes no further. Fingers crossed.
Yeah, and of course, there is a possibility, bearing in mind the huge expense around this, Callum, which will be like telephone numbers times a billion. The length of time, the consultations, all that goes with it, there is a wide possibility this will never see the light of day.
Again, it wouldn't surprise me. This isn't the first time that ID cards have been on the agenda, and again, it certainly won't be the last. And you're right that these, I think they're predicting around the 500 million mark in terms of cost. We all know it's going to be a lot longer than that, a lot more than that, and it's going to take much longer. The government IT projects are infamously a complete nightmare. This is quite an ambitious one, and certainly won't be on time or on budget.